Hey, my name is Scott Lydon, and you're watching Swifty. In this video, we're going to go over trailing closure syntax. I'm also going to break down closures piece by piece. And also, we're going to walk through the steps the compiler would take in reading the code that we write. If you've ever looked at closures and had a deer in the headlights moment where you're having trouble keeping track of what's going on, this video will definitely help.
Let's say we have a function that takes a closure as a parameter. Closure, and it's going to be, actually this should be describing the type of the closure, not actually giving the closure itself, because we're in the definition of a function that accepts a closure. Alright, so right now we have it as a closure that takes nothing and returns nothing, but let's say we want one that takes a string and returns nothing. So now the definition of the function takes does not return anything, and the definition of the type of the parameter does not return anything as well. What types does takes take? Now the type it takes is a closure that takes a string and returns nothing. Now what type does closure take? It takes a string. What type does closure return? Nothing. So we're going to create a secret string, and we're going to call it cats. And we're actually going to pass it to the closure that would be passed into this function. So it's a little Inception-like, but here's the closure, and it takes a string, and we're going to give it the secret string. So what we have is the definition of the type of closure that this parameter name takes, and then we also have a call to that very closure that would be taken by this function called takes. So you should be wondering, how does the call of takes look? Because we have the definition right here. So the call looks like this, takes, and it's saying it knows that the type should be a closure that takes a string and returns nothing. Now, if we're to do this, then I have to give a name to the string that it takes. Let's call it secret. And then I have to use the keyword in to signify that secret is the name I'm giving to the parameter that would be passed in. And then I'm saying print secret. So the problem is, this looks like a pain. So if you look at the right side here, we have a parenthesis, and then we have a curly brace, and then we have another parenthesis, and that's just kind of confusing. Now another way we could do this is and also there's a parenthesis here. It's kind of like, where do these all coordinate and connect to? If I had an even more complex closure that I was passing in, this would be much worse. This is a very simple closure that I'm passing in. So one thing we can do is we can put these on separate lines, and then we have this awkward kind of like parentheses down here and a curly brace. And so one thing that Swift does is allow you to do trailing closure syntax. So if the last parameter that's passed in is a closure, then you don't have to have these two parentheses, and you can take away the parameter name. So let's do that. So I'm going to do takes and then like that, and it'll work just fine. So this already, if you're new to closures, I'm sure is kind of mind-boggling. It's hard to keep everything straight, what's calling what, where is something defined. So let's go through the steps that the compiler takes. So first, let's comment this out because we're not really using it right now. And then, so the compiler imports UIKit, gives you access to all that UIKit has to offer in your code, and then it sees this keyword func, and then defines this function for later use, and it just keeps it in its pocket. And then when it gets to the call, it says, oh, okay, so it's using, the developer used the name that maps to the function that he defined, or she, and there's a opening curly brace, which means he's probably using trailing closure syntax, which means that this closure that follows the call to this function definition, this closure is being passed in as the parameter here. It jumps to this definition and then starts executing the code with this closure available to it in this body. So first line, it declares a constant called secret string and assigns it the value cats. Then it calls the closure that is available to it that we passed in, this one right here. The closure takes a string, and we know that because we specified that here. So it takes a string, and luckily secret string is a string. And so it passes that in, and then the compiler execution jumps to over here. So it binds this cats to secret now, and it gives it this, so this name secret, basically you could think of it as holds the string cats, and then it's available in this closure body, and it's printing secret, which was binded to cats, and that's how we get cats down here.